Nice to see you again. How's Aria?
Thank you.
All right, well, everyone, thank you so much for coming out here. It's so good to see so many people and to see so many familiar faces. It just really fills my heart. Those of you who know our story know that we started about a year ago. Actually, I think our 1-year anniversary is going to be next month, right? Started at a little bar and a little pub in Santa Monica, yep. And here we are today. So, and yeah. Good.
So we have monthly meetings. We create our own content. We're working on outreach and connecting. We have made a lot of incredible partnerships. Lucy, Collective Avenue Coffee, Lumio, Worker Co-op from New Zealand, who we have a workshop with next month. There have been lots of different people along the way that we're thankful to build these connections with. And we believe that cooperative forms of business are one of the ways in which we can address the many intersectional issues that are keeping so many people down today. And though often miscredited, they are efficient as traditional company, as efficient as traditional companies, more productive, longer lasting. At the macro level, we consider them to be one of the ways in which we can alter the employer-employee relationship that so odiously links us all. And on the micro level, workers and cooperatives are, on average, less alienated. They're happier, and that's something we can get behind.
So, hi everyone, my name is Andrea, and this is
Liz.
Sorry,
my name is
Kayla.
Liz. Forgot that part.
Say my name too?
I think so, but that's all right. But so we're the co-organizers of this event, and we want to just take this moment to thank you all for coming. It's really great to see everyone, and you've helped us, today, and we hope that you keep doing that, like in the months that come, in any capacity. You can volunteer and so on. You want to share your pictures of the day. All that information is on there. Support us in any meaningful way would be great. That being said, we're going to get out of the way, and we're going to give you, the dessert, the first course and everything. Professor Richard Wolff.
Yes. So I've never before been compared to a piece of cake, but it's a new experience, and I appreciate it. Yes. So, what?
Good thing it wasn't a pretzel.
That's true. It's true. I tried to think what I might say that would be of some interest to all of you. So I came up with two things. So I'll do one and then the other. The first one is to tell you kind of what's happening in terms of how things look from New York City, where we're based. And the second is about the strategy, the political strategy going forward that you might want to think about in terms of what you're going to do. So first about what's happening. We continue to be amazed in New York City with our own growth and with the growth of the audience for what we're doing. I won't pretend to understand why this is happening. I mean, I can say the things we can all say, the crash of 2008, the election of Trump, Bernie, the Occupy, all those things, they're all, of course, relevant. But how they came together to produce this upswing, this upsurge of interest in what we have to say is still something we only half understand, and half is being generous. And we need to understand it better to know how best to react. So it's not a minor matter to get this clear. But let me tell you sort of what has begun to happen. First, I believe we're now up to 18 groups like this across the United States. I think it's 18. If you go to our website, you can see that. The latest one, Phoenix, Arizona, Melbourne, Australia. I mean, it's just extraordinary. Groups like yours forming slowly, steadily around democracy at work, the critique of the status quo, capitalism, the system we have, and looking towards worker co-ops as a key part of where we go next, as a solution to the problems we have, or at least as an important part of the solution. So we're amazed. We're amazed that these groups are happening, that all of those issues that kept people from getting together to do the kind of thing we're doing are somehow breaking down, and people are getting together. Particularly here in the United States, you know, we have a history of at least half a century of people on the left being so afraid of getting together with other people in the same organization, having this visceral sense that that's not going to go well. That either the police will bother you, or you'll lose your job, or your friends and neighbors will look at you as if you have some bad disease that's catching, et cetera, et cetera. The instinct, don't do it. That is not blocking this. I don't know exactly why that's not happening the way it always did, but it isn't. And it isn't, as you can see, looking around the room here. It isn't. And it isn't in all these other places as well. And now what's happening to me, since I'm still much more of the public face of this than I ought to be and than I want to be. This can't be an operation that's built as much as it still is around me. It's got to have more of you doing it, speaking, standing up, being the visible faces of all of this, going out and talking to groups. I know for some people, the notion of standing in front, I don't know how many were there last night, but so we had 600 or 700 people in that church. What?
Bravo.
Yeah, no, we had a huge audience in that church. Beautiful church, and it basically filled. A big old church with stained glass windows. It was a nice event last night. These events are now common for us. 600 or 700 people, normal. I've had more, and so we need more people doing this, and we're actively looking. So those of you that think you might, do this. And those of you that are afraid because, you know, it's a little daunting to get up in front of hundreds of people staring right at you. So if you put on the wrong outfit, they're going to see. And if you stumble when you say something, they're going to be right there. It's just like riding a bicycle. After the fourth or fifth time, you don't even think about it anymore. You get up there, you explain what it is, and people are grateful for what you have to say, and they'll show it to you. Many of you have been very kind in the little minutes I've been here to come up and say something nice to me. It's wonderful. These are wonderful experiences. I'm just like you. Somebody come up and say thank you for what you do. I mean, you know, 3 people do it, it makes your day. Yeah. And those things are available because for the first time in 50 years, something is going on the left end of American politics that's at least as powerful as what's happening on the right wing. Everybody talks about the Tea Party and Trump and all of that, and that's an important part of what's going on. I don't deny it for a minute. But at the other end, I can tell you from my own experience, at least as big a transformation is underway, and we don't yet have the candidate, although Bernie came close to beginning to demonstrate that this is going on. But we're going to get them. I don't know exactly who they'll be any more than anybody else, but the audience is there just waiting for people, and it could just as well be one of you as anybody else to emerge and be the kind of symbol. And I don't just mean one, we need a lot of people doing this, and you all ought to think about it. One of the ways you can grow as a group is to have yourselves out there. If there's a high school in the area that wants to hear about something, you send someone. And the fact that you don't know it all that well, this is how you're going to learn. Nothing makes you learn how to do this better than having to stand in front of a group of people and not make a fool out of yourself. The pressure on you when you go home getting ready, you'll get very nervous. You'll eat too much, 12 cupcakes. But you know, while they're rolling around and reminding you about your weight problem, you will actually get yourself ready and you'll go out and do it. And if you stumble a few times, so what? So you'll stumble a few times. That's how you learn, and you get better at it. You'll notice when people look at you funny that you just said the wrong thing. That's how everybody else learned how to do this. You'll learn it too. The important thing is that you do it, because that's how you'll get good at it. And remember, you've thought about this more than the kids in the high school class. You've thought about it more than the people in the Rotary Club or in the church social committee or whatever it is that you find as a way to go. And churches, by the way, are becoming very different than they've been. Half of my public appearances are now in churches. Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish synagogues, all over the place. The ministers, the rabbis, the priests, and so on are changing. They're offended by Trump also in lots of complicated ways. They're shaken by what's being done to immigrants, and they're willing to begin to step up with a little bit of backbone they kind of had lost sight of. I'm being as careful as I can. And so they're allies. The union movement is in such terrible shape that they're desperate for allies, and they're increasingly open also, if not for reasons of solidarity ideologically, then just to not be as alone and as isolated and as in such a losing situation. It's very sad. But there's lots of good union people, and they have long histories, many of them, of struggle. To get them as allies would be very important for us, very, very important. And now is the time. I don't want to over-dramatize it, but having said that, of course, I will. For 50 years, really for the last 50 years since the Second World War, to be a leftist, a radical, a socialist, a Marxist, any of these words, meant you were weird, you were strange, you were ostracized from the community, you were looked at as if you were strange or crazy or disloyal to America, all those things. And what?
And dangerous.
Dangerous, all those kind of words, that's what you were. And so, and if you're considered like that, what are you going to do? You understand that people don't want to be looked at that way. What kind of life can you have? Your job is at risk, your position in your church is at risk, your position in the neighborhood is at risk. You don't want to do it. And we understood it. That's not true anymore. It isn't. I'm telling you, I went around the country in a way that probably none of you do, and I'm telling you, to my surprise, it's not the case anymore. But that implies that we don't have the excuse we had for 50 years not to get out there. We had a good excuse. It was very dangerous to get out there. It isn't now, so you don't have any excuse. If we don't do something now, it's on us. We are the ones now whose hesitance is going to kill it. Because of the freedom, to be crude about it, this government is now so busy trying to solve the problems of a system that's falling apart, which it can't do, that it's distracted. It's not bothering us. It thinks its big problems are in places like North Korea, which its Navy can't find. You all got that last week, right? It's over here and the Navy was over there. And nobody understood where any of these places were, since we have officials who can't spell North Korea. They're worried about North Korea, they're worried about Syria, they're worried about Muslims, then they're worried about immigrants. They're not worried about us. That's very important. We have a level of freedom, we have a level of opportunity. Would be a tragedy, and on us if we miss it. And it's a real window. I didn't think it was going to last. I didn't think it when everything started changing, as I mentioned to one of you a few minutes ago. Changing for me, but therefore also for you. I've been saying things critical of capitalism most of my adult life. This is not, I didn't have some epiphany last week that's made me shift. I've been doing this a long time. But it's only in the last 5 years that suddenly this becomes popular. This becomes interesting to all kinds of people who heard me before and weren't interested at all. They were scared, it was dangerous, it was somehow frightening. They don't think that anymore. They just don't. They're excited. And I thought, this can't last. This is so abnormal. This is so different. But it's now 6 years, and not only is it continuing, it's getting better. I now turn away 3 out of 4 invitations I get because I can't do it. I can't physically be all these places. I'm here for 3 days. You know, I don't like this. Sitting on an American airplane is like being the sardine in the can. You know, it's no fun at all. They've managed to destroy that as an experience. Used to be exciting, now it's a major drag. Unless you fly business class, and unfortunately we don't have enough money for that. So I don't like doing it, but I can't turn this down. I did that last night to 600 or 700 people. I'm talking to you today. I talk at Occidental College this evening. Tomorrow I go to a conference at UC Riverside, you know, on and on. I could be doing this all day, every day, year round. In terms of the opportunities, they're just there. Everybody knows, I'm going to go out on a limb, but everybody knows. There's that wonderful song, Leonard Cohen. I don't know if any of you remember it. Everybody knows. If you ever get a chance to hear, and just Google it, you can hear it on the internet. Listen to Leonard Cohen's song, Everybody Knows, because it's about this. It's about other things too, but it's about this. Everybody knows there's something big not working in this society. That's why we elected Trump, because everybody kind of knows. They don't know what to do about it, but they know there's something terribly wrong. And whatever that is, it's not going to be fixed by Mr. Trump. He's busy making more money. He'll do fine at that, and then he'll be done, and the next one will come in. So it's our chance. Everything is creating for us opportunities like we've never had before. And in some ways, we have to thank Mr. Trump, much as that might be difficult for all of you, because right now, he's the best organizer we have. He is. He's agitating one community after another. He's forcing people to have arguments with one another, to clarify their opinions, to understand what they care about, to be clearer than they were before about the folks that are with them and the folks that are at least not yet with them. That's very helpful to us. All kinds of ways that's helpful to us. I can see it in the people who explain to me why they invited me to come somewhere. So let me tell you a story about one of them. I spoke a few weeks ago at Sonoma State College up in Rohnert Park, California. It's, I don't know, about an hour or so north of San Francisco. Very nice place, fancy campus, a lot of new buildings, very nice. They were very kind, and they invited me to be whatever it was, Scholar of the Month or whatever it was. About to think of the old Playmate of the Month, but it wasn't that. I kept all my clothes on. They were very kind, very friendly, and when I spoke a couple months before I went out there to the president who handled inviting me, the president of the university, she explained to me why they invited me. She said, well, we've had our students here learn in many of their courses about, you know, the good things about capitalism, and it's about time they heard the other perspective. Would you please come and present a criticism of capitalism? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I made the poor woman repeat it, which she very obligingly did, and she meant it. And when I went there, that's what I did, and that's what I was asked to do. But take that, that's a sign, folks, of a lot of things, that she was comfortable as the president of a branch of the system to think like that and to reach out to someone like me to come there and present to the students. And we had a very good meeting. We had hundreds of students in a huge auditorium who had a dose of criticism of capitalism. I'm happy to tell you nobody died. Everybody survived. And we had a very good conversation, and the Q&A lasted as long as it lasted last night, till the custodian made us leave, because the interest was all there. So a year ago, I did the same thing at the University of Kentucky, in Lexington, Kentucky. Think about that. And I do that a lot. One of the best stations for the radio program that you get here on KPFK is in Tampa, Sarasota, Clearwater, Florida. WMNF, very important radio station, by the way. Been an independent, progressive radio station for 30 years. Huge audience. And I love going down there because part of me can't get over that I'm sitting in St. Petersburg, Florida, with hundreds of people cheering on a critique of capitalism, who listen to it every week. So this is an extraordinary period of our history. June 8th, just pick another one. June 8th is a conference in Frankfurt, Germany. Because all over Europe, like in the United States, political actors on the left are gathering around the notion of the sanctuary city. The notion that it is the job of all the different parts of the left to begin thinking in terms of an alliance which begins in the protection and solidarity with immigrant communities that are being targeted as scapegoats for the problems of the societies which brought them in, after all. And that the rest of the left can find its way to ally with this effort and to ask in return, without hesitance or shame, that the immigrant communities that they're helping also help them when they need help from the immigrant community for their labor struggles, for their struggles to ask for support in building worker co-op, all of that. And so they've invited me, so I'm going to Frankfurt, Germany. German is my first language, for those of you who don't know, so it's a chance for me to speak my mother tongue. So I like to do it anyway, but this is a chance to go and to talk about how the United States is also, in its way, part of that. So let me turn, that's a nice segue, to the strategic imagery. Here's, and it's just speculations, but it's a speculation whose logic you'll see. How could we grow conceptually as a political movement in this country? I think it would look, well, my guess is it's going to look something like this. That our goal is to create in the United States a worker co-op sector of the economy, that a large part of the cities and towns, the states, the country, is going to see a transition from top-down hierarchical capitalist enterprises into worker co-ops, for all the reasons that you already know about and that we are championing. In order for this to happen, and it's already underway, but in order for this to happen in an organized way, we need not only to start co-ops and to help in the conversion of businesses that are organized as capitalist enterprises into worker co-ops, and all of that's already happening, and it will happen more, but in order to facilitate that, in order to build that as a political movement, this transition, this growth of worker co-ops needs to have a political arm. It needs to have a political party. What would that party be and do? It would be the advocate of the worker co-op at the level of the government, whether that's the city or the state or the federal government. Its job would be to say, we are the political representatives of the desire, of the demand, for there to be a worker co-op sector of the economy so that all Americans can choose whether to buy their products from a capitalist enterprise or a worker co-op. Just like today, you can choose to buy something made in Bangladesh or maybe made in Paraguay or all those kinds of things. Now you're going to have a choice. Do you want your dollar of expenditure for a blouse or a software program to be a dollar that supports a worker co-op kind of enterprise or a capitalist? That's just as important as having a blue shirt or a yellow shirt. You're expressing a notion about what the community ought to be like, which you have the right to do. Well, you only have that right if there is such a sector. Otherwise, you don't have that right today because except for places like Collective Avenue Coffee. There we go. Unless you have such an option, and that option has to be everywhere, you don't have that freedom of choice. And ditto, this is the way this party would articulate itself, Americans should have the freedom of choice where to work. You want to work in a top-down, hierarchical, non-democratic institution? Or do you want to work in a democratically run worker co-op? In order for you to have the freedom of choice where to work, there has to be a sector so you can choose whether you want to or not. So we would be a political party that's in favor of freedom of choice. That, along with baseball and apple pie, makes us Americans, right? We want freedom of choice. What would this party do? It would push for every conceivable governmental advantage that worker co-ops could want. Let me give you some examples. A law that makes it easy to set up such a business. Such laws already exist or in embryo in various American states, including here in California, but in others as well. We want all that developed to be a generally known code, to let people know how easily they can go through the steps of setting up a worker co-op or converting from a capitalist to a worker co-op business. That's one thing we want. Here's some other things we want, so let's be expansive. We want courses in high schools and colleges about how to organize a worker co-op. The Mondragon University already has all of those courses, and they have all the reading lists, and they're all in English. So it wouldn't take us very long to set up a program, maybe 10 minutes. So, but we should require that. We should require that young people begin to know that's an option. You can set up a business this way. And the course should be elementary at a high school level and developed in college and be part of the curriculum of every business school.
I recommend a communist MBA.
Yes, right. We wouldn't call it that for obvious reasons. Good idea, but branding needs a little tweaking. Yes, right.
I'm still working on it.
But let's go a little further. Let's use the sample of something in America that's been around a long time called the Small Business Administration. Some of you may know, the SBA. Been around a long time, and by the way, reflect a very similar political history. The awareness of small businesses in America 100 years ago, that they were getting screwed in the market by big businesses who can cut a better deal with a lawyer, a better deal with the bank, a better deal. And so small businesses were being squeezed out by big businesses who took advantage of their bigness. So they developed the idea the government should, here we go, level the playing field, football metaphor, right? It's hard if you're running uphill and trying to get the touchdown, it's difficult. So you want it level. So the Small Business Administration was to do what? Arrange low interest loans for little businesses so they could get a lower interest loan without being defeated by a big bank, which you can always cut a better deal with, a big corporation that can cut a better deal with a bank. So now you get a cheap loan than you otherwise would. And that the government would commit, for example, in Europe, this is very common, that the government commits that at least 20% or 40% of its purchases have to be made from companies with less than 50 employees, so that the government as a massive buyer isn't always privileging the biggest company, etc., etc. Well, we have a wonderful menu. It's all there. We want all of that for worker co-ops. Yeah. And why? Same argument. If there should be small as well as big business, both capitalist, well, there should be worker co-ops as well as capitalist business for the same kinds of reasoning. We can just borrow the language, change a few words, we're all home free. And the precedent is there. If you want more precedent, minority business administration, women business administration, we have all of that already. We're just asking for the co-op to get the same respect, the same governmental support. And then the big punch. Government has been subsidizing and benefiting capitalist enterprises for the history of the United States. And they have two political parties that do their work for them, don't they? Yep. One is called Republican and one is called Democrat. And they compete with one another to get tax breaks. What's Mr. Trump doing? He's working right now to lower the corporate tax rate from 35% to 20%. That's his major priority right now. You know what that is? That's a big subsidy for capitalist enterprises. All we're asking is, we want to catch up. We have 300 years to catch up on. We want lots of tax relief and lots of subsidies in order to do for the worker co-op sector what you've already been doing for the capitalist sector and never made available to worker co-ops in any kind of systematic way. This would be the political arm of the worker co-ops. Every worker co-op would have a vested interest in supporting such a political party, because what that political party did was to get the government supports that helped that worker co-op to survive. So where would the support of the party come? From the worker co-op. They'd have every reason to fund it, to support it, to get its members to become the base of such a political party, the people who become the emissaries, the missionaries, the explainers to the larger community of what they're doing. Not just doing in their little coffee business or their little home cleaning business or their little software shop, but as part of a social project to move a society from the capitalist nature that it has had to one that is more cooperative, one that is more collective. Now we have a vision for a new society. We are not just a party that supports a particular kind of business. Yes, that's where we come from, but we have a vision of a new society that everybody will benefit from. That's what you need to build a political party. That's what the left has said it needed to shape up to. It needed to find a vision that would organize, motivate, and unify it. Well, that's it. That's a recipe for a transformation. It's a justification for a new political party because it makes it crystal clear what it's there for. No mystery. And this has got nothing to do with the policies about North Korea or East Overshoe. This is about the United States and the transformation of this society to solve its problems in a better way than has been achieved until now. And this is the political party that can do that. And it can reach out from such a base to all the other potential components of a transformative project in America. Immigrants, women, ethnic minority, you name it. All of them become allies, and they're allies who will want to ally because their support for more worker co-ops doesn't violate anything they're interested in, and they get friends. Friends which in all of their struggles will be very happy to have, whether it be to protect the immigrant or to get gender equality or to get racial integration and equality. All those issues which we will embrace will be now we, the worker community cooperatives, will be coming to these other communities saying, we're not here out of guilt and we're here to make a deal. We are going to help you with the issues that motivate you. You help us with this worker co-op movement, and together we're going to change this country. That'll excite people, it'll motivate people, it will get the juices flowing. And compare that to the offer made by the organizer of the Republican and Democratic Party. It'll be easy. This is 50 times more exciting, more inspiring, has more potential to make your life better than anything they offer. And it's not about this or that candidate or none of that. The candidates should be everywhere. They should be all the people that are working in worker co-ops or near them or interested in them if they're not yet ready to form them. We don't care the order. It can be first a worker co-op, then such a party. Or maybe first such a party, then help build worker co-ops, or any mix and match. It doesn't really matter if the understanding is clear. Now, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I understand it's hard enough to have a group like this function. It's hard enough to form a worker co-op. And those are hard, long, difficult things. On the other hand, you'll do the particular task with much more energy and much more effectiveness if you have a vision, a sense of where you're going, a larger project that's exciting that you can explain to your sister or your cousin or your neighbor who will want to know why you're going to all those meetings. Are you in AA or what's going on here, right? You have to explain yourself. I don't mean to put any negative on AA. As I said last night to some of you, it's a model, not a model of what we can replicate if we were so strong as to be able to do what AA did. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I want you to understand that you're getting involved in something here, and I don't know whether it'll succeed. No one should misunderstand me. I'm not saying we're launched, we're going to get, none of that. I can't do that. That kind of cheerleading you needed somebody else for. But that what I just sketched out for you, that's possible, that's clear to us now. It's possible. Whether we can achieve it, we'll see. But that's kind of where things are leading us as much as we're leading them. And I'm excited beyond words that we're talking about the potential to finally change the United States in fundamental ways that we've dreamed about and fantasized about and imagined, but are becoming possible. And that doesn't happen very often in a society's history, and we really need to grab it before it disappears on us, which it might. And which the people who want to keep this society from changing will be working to make sure. And they have impressive resources at their disposal. We should make no mistake about that. But now I can say, excuse me, for the first time in our lives, we also have some resources. This is a vision and an image, and these are meetings that are real, and we have them now in the 18 cities, and the audiences we have. We're now in a position to say we have some resources that are emerging here too. And we have a more interesting and exciting vision of where this can go than the people who are trying to keep the lid on this society. What they can offer, not so good. They just gave us Mr. Trump. Not too impressive. And the people he ran against, that's why they lost. They're even less impressive. So our competition is in deep trouble. And we're rising, and they're not. And that's a precious, precious thing. So that's where my head is these days. One personal note, because some of you have asked. You've been very kind. You've said, thank you for coming out here. You're very welcome. But I want to say, as I sometimes do, I am having the time of my life. I love this. I never dreamed I would see this in my lifetime. I always knew that capitalism was heading for a fall and that the fall would be difficult, especially in this country, even more than in others, because it's got such illusions about itself and its economic system. So I knew it would be hard here. But I didn't think, the luck of the draw when my parents decided to have children wouldn't work for me. I wouldn't see it. So I am seeing way more than I thought I could. Things are becoming possible that I never thought. Last night, standing in front of 600 or 700 people who had paid money, good money, to come and sit in that church and spend a couple hours talking about the collapse of capitalism and where we go from here. That's an amazing thing to have happened. 5 years ago, that was unthinkable. It just was. Even the people who, like Howard Zinn, who appeared in that same church some years ago, I was told last night, I knew him. He knew he had to be very careful about what he said, as we all did. We all had to come up with clever ways of dancing around what we had to say, which is why the name you proposed a few minutes ago had to be pushed aside a bit. Don't take it personally. I don't have to dance around the words anymore. I just don't. As you'll see, if some of you come to the event tonight at Occidental, it's even now possible to take on socialism, communism right on, and I will do that tonight. And I think you'll see that it'll be done in a way that doesn't scare people, doesn't make them feel we're in dangerous territory. Gives them a way to understand what those things were and how what we're doing borrows from, but also differs from that in a way that is understandable and representable to other people in a way that will not only not scare them, but will actually draw them in. This is an amazing time, and I just hope that we can all squeeze this for all the wonderful juice that can come out for us all, and that it will be an amazing ride in the next few years if we can build on it and keep it going. So let me stop and whatever you want to say. The question is, there's a story in today's LA Times that details how construction in this area, Southern California, has become more non-union, more low-wage over the last 30 or 40 years than it was before. And his question was, given that, might there be ways to intervene in the entertainment industry, which is experiencing comparable wage cuts and loss of jobs, with the notion of a co-op? How would you go about that? Is that happening? It's happening, although from what I know, on a small scale so far. But yes, I think the way to get at it would be a general argument of the sort we could make in many industries. And it goes something like this. Unions weren't always limited in how they understood their role to getting better wages and working conditions for the employee. Or to put it this way, a little bit differently, unions used to say, yes, we're struggling to get higher wages and better working conditions, no question, that's what we do. But we understand as unions that as long as the way we get them is to get a contract signed with an employer that lasts, say, 3 years, which is typical, or some other period of time. Contracts can be written in whatever way the two sides agree on. As long as we do that, we're constantly worried that when the contract is over in 2 years or 3 years, the employer will want to take back whatever it is we were able to win the last time. Indeed, the employer will be working over the life of the contract to set himself up to be in a position when it expires to take back and undo, because that's just the logic of the situation. Every employer would do that. Which means you're never secure. You never, even when you win something, you can't really count on it. You can't buy that house because that's going to be payments for 15 years and your contracts are only for 3. And if it doesn't work out real well, you will not be able to make the mortgage payments and you'll be out on the street, blah, 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 blah. So unions once upon a time understood that and said that our strategy is, as long as there's capitalism and we have to deal with an employer and we may sign contracts, we will do the best we can, but that's not the end because that's not secure. The only way to be secure about the conditions you win with an employer is if you're the employer yourself. Well, it has a beauty to it if you think about it. It's like a piece of music that ends with a nice chord. This is a way to say that there's a natural alliance here between a co-op movement and a labor movement. The labor movement does the best you can within the framework of the system, and the co-op is where you got to go if you ever want to get out of the insecurities that this system condemns you to. Everybody's going to understand that. There's no rocket science here. This is the logic of capitalism. And nowadays you have endless stories, such as those in today's times, to indicate what the risks are, what they will do to get rid of the union altogether, if they can, weaken it if they can't get rid of it, go around it if they can't do the other two. So you're in an endless struggle, which these days you are losing. I mean, you all know, right? For the last 50 years, the union movement is weaker each year than it was the year before. 50 years ago, roughly a third of American workers were in unions. Today, it's about 9 or 10%. That's not... The nicest thing to call that is a disaster. That's a disaster for the unions. In the private sector, it's now less than 7% of workers are in a union. That's a destruction of a union movement. You've kept the game as we fight for better wages and working conditions. That's been your strategy. That hasn't worked. It's not that it's all your fault. It's not just your strategy. You had a lot of opposition from Republicans and Democrats alike. But whatever part of it is your responsibility, sticking with a strategy like that, given what it's done for you, that's nuts. So working with a co-op movement, I mean, you got very little left to lose. I have been with union meetings and union leaders where I've said this. And here's what's happened. And I don't mind saying it to you as honestly as I can. The union leaders agree. They agree with what we're saying. No problem. They get it. They've learned that from their own realities and their own struggles. But when we're done speaking and I say, well, look, here's a way. Well, let me give you a concrete example without names. All across America, hospitals are closing in poor neighborhoods. Why? Very simple. If a hospital is located in a poor neighborhood, often an African American or Hispanic American, poor neighborhood, they depend on Medicaid and Medicare, old people, reimbursements. The level of reimbursement that the federal government gives for Medicaid and Medicare is crappy. You all know that, or you should. So hospitals can't survive when they get paid on those scales that come from the federal government for Medicaid, that's low income, and Medicare over 65, right? So for a hospital to survive, it has to rely on people with private insurance, people who work for an employer who provides private insurance, or people who are rich enough to pay the bill themselves out of their own money. So that's what hospitals are doing in America, trying to get the people who have insurance on the job or who are rich, which leaves the hospitals in poor areas. I give you an example in New York City. In poor neighborhoods, people who have, the few who have insurance at the job, are approached by hospitals in other boroughs, typically Manhattan, who say, if you get sick, call us. We will send an ambulance to your home on the spot to pick you up and bring us to Manhattan, which is an hour drive, rather than to go to your local hospital, which is 10 minutes away. Then something happens which I particularly enjoy. It's the visit to the local mayor. Because there's a conversation there that I guarantee you is one of the great moments of your life. You're sitting, imagine this, you're sitting across the big oak paneled desk of Mr. Mayor or Mr. Congressman or Mr. or Ms. whatever. And you say, look, we're doing this. We're going to convert this hospital into a co-op. And that's going to take care of a lot of our costs because we're not going to have this army of highly paid hospital administrators. We're going to save on that. But, you know, it's going to be rough to make it. So we need something, Mr. Mayor. We need no taxes to pay. We need a nice fat subsidy. We need this, we need this, we need this. Now, if you give that to us, Mr. Mayor, we will run around this community saying, you saved the hospital. You saved the jobs. You are Jesus Christ in a new shape. That's not the best part. Here comes the best part. And Mr. Mayor, if you don't, you'll never be elected to anything. Because we will go around this community and we will explain, you would have had a hospital, you would have had a job, if this mayor didn't screw you to the wall. Be sure not to vote for him next Thursday. You understand? I never have to go to that last part in any detail. I begin to talk there, and the mayor looks at me, his eyes go down, and he knows exactly, because all we're doing is what is done to him by every other industry in the area every third Thursday anyway. It's only what's new is we're playing that game, not them. He has to give it to us. Otherwise, he's out of there. You understand? These are one of the ways in which the co-op becomes a politically powerful game. It can solve real problems in communities and make it impossible, even for the most venal politician, to turn away. Because it's too dangerous for them to turn away. As this system cannot solve its problems, we become able to intervene with a kind of solution that even if they don't like it, they don't have a solution. That is a new game for which they're not prepared, which gives us that element of surprise that's very useful. And the look on those politicians' face when you said it to them, I guarantee you, you will remember that moment all your life. So I think that's what we do. We go and we say, look what's happening to you. Look what's happening to you. You don't want to be outdone by non-union. I mean, you got to deal with this situation. In New York City, by the way, the same thing is happening. The construction unions there have a tactic. I don't know if any of you have seen this. They have an enormous, I kid you not, an enormous gray rat. But it's made up out of, it's air, you blow it up, it's like a balloon in the shape of a very ugly looking big rat. And wherever there's a struggle between a union and an construction type struggle, they have the big rat. And then there are people handing out flyers denouncing whoever the employer is for being a big rat. It has, I mean, it's very dramatic, it's nice, you get your picture in the TV, it's good. But it's not enough. It's just not enough. And there it is. It's a problem that the unions have for which their standard solutions haven't worked, which is the argument, the opening for us. Well, what about if the unions stop functioning that way? What about if they begin to organize co-ops with groups like ours that work at that, who want that, who support that, who can mobilize the community? By the way, you know the role for Democracy at Work was with that hospital business? We were saying that what we would do, I mean, we don't know how to run a hospital, so we're not offering to do that. We're not competent to do that. But what we're good at is we know how to mobilize a community politically. We know how to put out the PR. We know how to put people up on television to talk about why this is a solution. And that frees up other people, the nurses union, who, by the way, were the strongest supporters of this. That is a very progressive union, particularly here in California, but it is everywhere. In New York also, the New York State, nurses are very good about all of this. They, more than SEIU or 1199, if you know the other unions that are in this space, they have their work to do to make such a thing work. And our job would be the mobilization, politically, ideologically. We're the ones who will design the leaflets that are handed out at the subway stops to explain to the community what this is about and why this is important and why it's not just important to save the hospital, but part of a movement to change America. There again, that vision that we offer makes this, well, I put it this way in one of my meetings with the union. You all remember, you union activists, you all remember, because you show movies at your union meetings about how the union movement in the 1930s wasn't just a movement to help workers, it was a movement to make a better America. It was, the unions were the leaders for a social movement. You remember with nostalgia, well, this is your chance to do that again. if the unions become advocates of a cooperativization of the American economy, the democratization of enterprises, you're not just helping your members get another buck. You're a social movement again. And if you're allied with immigrant groups, and if you're allied with others, in that image I gave you before, you're now a component, a key component of a social movement. You have your chance to capture again what you had in the 30s. Don't let that slip by. For many of these leaders, they get nostalgic at that moment because they have seen those movies 100 times. They want to go back. They really do on some level. But we're the first ones to offer them a way to do it. And they're dying because they're now looked upon, even by their own members, as the deliverers of a higher wage. And if you can't do that, then who needs you? And why am I paying you dues? That's not a social movement mentality. That's a service mentality, and the unions are killed by that. Anyway, that's how I would, yeah.
The electoral vision is very exciting. What you mentioned about the party, it's a different way of thinking about it. If you've spoken about this elsewhere, have people then responded? So, well, we've got Bernie's Our Revolution, we've got the Green. Your reflections on existing progressive electoral initiatives and parties and so on, and how this might work with or beyond or supplement. How do you see the configuration here?
Sure. I see something evolving here in the United States. Occupy is a major break for me. I think we all ought to take our hats off to Occupy. That was a breakthrough that we will understand more and more as the years go by how important that little or not so little thing was. And the important thing about it was, for the first time in 50 years, a left-wing political movement put the economic issues right up front. The 1% versus the 99% was their defining slogan. Up until that time, whether it was anti-racist or anti-imperialist or anti-sexist or whatever, anti pro-ecological, all of those movements had terrible struggles inside among those who said, don't go near that economic stuff because you'll be branded a communist, a socialist, all of that. And so they were very careful to... The Occupy, half not aware of what they were doing, dismissed all of that. We're putting that 1% versus 99 right up front. Breakthrough. Major, without understanding it, they were saying it's now possible to say that stuff again the way it was before World War II. We can do it, and we can get away with it, and it won't be the end. And everybody held their breath, even those who didn't understand what they were doing, and we all saw the world didn't end. In a matter of weeks, in 300 cities, there are little tent encampments on the downtown green or whatever it was, where people, it all worked. It was okay. It was, the President of the United States started using 1%, 99%, as if it had become normalized. There's a fantastic transformation given this country's history. And the result of that was, there's no way you could have had Bernie without that. For a man to say, I'm a socialist, granted he's the most moderate socialist you can possibly be. But of course that makes sense. You want the first one to make the breakthrough, to make it okay to be a socialist, should be a kindly, old, gray-haired man from Vermont, you know. Of course, you know. The only other person who could have pulled that off would be, I don't know, Susan Sarandon or something, right? Because who's that going to be upset? You know, everyone likes her. Or the other one that Trump attacked, I forget her name. Meryl Streep. It could have been her. You know, someone like that. So I think Occupy, Bernie, and now we're another step. That's all. What I'm telling you, this vision of a party, that's the next step of all of this. So I thank them. They were conditions for us to take a step. Now we're taking a step. Others will hear what we're saying and take it yet others. To answer your question, yes, I'm beginning to say this in a variety of circumstances, including publicly. I will be talking about this on the radio. Oh, that reminds me. Someone said earlier something about Lumio. What is it about?
Yeah, we have a workshop with them the first week of May.
Okay. If you listen this Sunday to my radio program here, I interview Richard Bartlett of Lumio, talking all about it. So if you're interested, you can learn about it. He explains all of that there and why he wants to build worker co-ops all over the world, which he's doing from his base in New Zealand, where he comes from. He's traveling the United States now for 10 weeks. He's going to be here. He's giving workshops, and it's very interesting. And we have a lot of connections with New Zealand and Australia. A lot of interest there in what we do and so on. So yeah, this idea is that, look, this is an evolution of something is happening in America, and we're a leaf carried on a stream that is becoming a raging river, and it's kind of overwhelming, and the leaf can get brushed aside, but it's something very organic that's going on here, and we're just another step in this. But it's our job. We're trying to be very self-conscious. To talk about a new political party is a very big step. And in order for that not to be just noise, it has to have a clear idea of what it is and how it's different from other parties. Otherwise, we're going to have, and I don't mean this as a criticism, but we can't go the route of declaring yet another party. A lot of people on the left have done that 100 times, and we don't know much about it because they are mushrooms. They come up after the rain, and then they disappear. Or they don't disappear. They just act as if they had disappeared. And a lot of these parties are just for people trying to keep alive a newsletter. I understand that. I'm not critical. It's better that they do that than it isn't done. But in order to really make this, you've got to have a way to define. The first question any American's going to ask us is, how and why is your party any different from other parties? We have to answer that. That's a very correct question for anybody to ask us. And we have to have a really good answer. This is who we are. This is why we think a party is necessary. This is what this party is going to do that the Republicans and Democrats are never going to do for you. We can answer those questions. And that's a result of Occupy and Bernie and everything that's happened. We can now answer that question, which means we're getting closer to being able to do it.
Because our party is unleavened.
What?
Because our party is unleavened.
Yes. At least not leavened by the usual. Yeah.
Even with a clear vision, how do we avoid all the normal pitfalls that plague third-party politics?
Yes, good question. How do we avoid them? Well, again, I'm so taken with the fact that we actually can now answer the question, why do you need a new party? We can do that because what the other parties are not doing and will not do, how we will proceed, what will we can answer a whole lot of questions. So I'm very excited that we can do that. Have we answered all the questions? No, and yours is a perfectly good one. How do we deal with the ways in which the two parties that now dominate this society have worked things out to maintain their domination? Well, this new party will have to face those. Let's start with an example. Proportional representation. In this country, we have winner-take-all elections. You get 51% of the vote, you get the position, and the political party that got 49% of the vote gets nothing. It lost. You are aware, I hope, that in most European countries, for example, they don't work like that. If you get 10% of the vote in an election, for example, in Germany or France or Italy, then you get 10% of the seats in Congress. You don't disappear. The notion is if 10% of the people want this party, they want those people that talk like that to be in a position to write the laws. Otherwise, you're disenfranchising those 10%. You're excluding their view from lawmaking because they didn't get more than 50%, which is bizarre. The Europeans think that it's very undemocratic to run elections the way we do, just in case you've never heard of it before. By the way, in the United States, we have proportional representation. We have it now, and we've had it in the past. So there's no question that we could have it again. For example, in many states, I don't know how California works, in the primaries, the candidate who gets 42% of the vote, gets 42% of the delegates to the convention. That's proportional representation. Remember how Bernie and Clinton got various percentages in various states, and they got corresponding. That's all proportional representation is. Let me give you another example. In the late 1940s, in New York City, for the city council, they had proportional representation, not in the primary, in the general election. And the United States Communist Party, based in New York City, ran a candidate. He was black man, an African American named Benjamin Davis. And the Communist Party got enough votes that he went on to the city council. How many of you knew that in 1948 a black communist sat on the city council of New York by virtue of proportional representation? A few of you did, but too few. Too few. And he introduced very important legislation. He was the most progressive. By the way, it did more for the Communist Party in New York City than anything they had done before. It gave them support in the black community. It gave them support in the Hispanic community. It gave them support in the white working class community because of the things Benjamin Davis said. He was a leader. He was a hero. He was the only one who talked like this. And they all had to get together, the Republicans and Democrats, to destroy him afterwards. And then they got rid of proportional representation, so that didn't happen again. But we have a history in it. We could change all this. Just as we changed proportional to non, we could change it back again. And that would be a very important step for a third party like ours, because it would mean that if we can get 5% or 10% of the votes, we are on the city council. And let me drive home to you what that means. In New York City, in Madison, Wisconsin, and there are other places, but I don't know where they all are. Well, actually here in Richmond in California, this is happening too. There's an effort to get the city councils to pass ordinances, to pass bills at the city level, to provide money to support worker co-ops. In New York City, they've appropriated several millions of dollars, which have been given to organizations that provide all kinds of supports to worker co-ops. Madison, Wisconsin appropriated $5 million. That is much smaller than New York, but they appropriated $5 million. Now, I understand New York is a unique place, Madison is a unique place, but this is very interesting. And on a city level, you're already big enough right now in this room for a coordinated effort to begin to mobilize to do that. You get one or two city council members to begin to move in this direction. They might be willing, if you are all a support for that, if you would have some meetings, if you would hand out some leaflet, if you would begin to do the kinds of things, you could then get, these are all interesting. You could go to a person like Kshama Sawant up in Seattle and ask her and her people to, at least in principle, they should be supportive. You weren't all at this last night. The British Labour Party is a perfect example of how far this has already gotten. So if you're not aware of this, let me tell you. The British Labour Party, the number 2 party in Great Britain, the British Labour Party has made the following commitment. If elected, they will pass a law that says the following. Any existing business in Great Britain, whether it's an office, a store, a factory, any kind of business, can stay as it is as long as it wants to stay in that form. But if it gets to any of the following situations, 1, it wants to close down, for whatever reason. Or number 2, it wants to sell itself to another company, for whatever reason. Or number 3, it wants to become a publicly owned company that issue shares and become a stockholder company from being its own. If any of those options are on the table for a company, it must, by law, provide what's called a right of first refusal to its own workers to buy the company and convert it into a co-op. That will be the law. But here's the best part. It's not just that. Because the question you will all have is, where would they get the money? To which the British Labour answers with a smile, the government will lend it to them. Yeah. Now, for those of you who don't know your history, that is how in the past transitions like this have made. When in Russia, before the revolution, When Russia ended feudalism, which was only about 1850, when Russia ended feudalism, the way it was done was that the Russian government, this is how the capitalists emerging in Russia did it. Your feudal manor is over. You have to release your serfs. There is no more feudalism. But the way we'll handle that is we will buy your feudal manor from you with government money. There are many precedents like that. There were people here in the United States, for those of you who don't know your history, there were people in the United States at the time of the Civil War who wanted slavery to be ended by the federal government buying all the black slaves and then liberating them. But the decision made by Lincoln and his advisors was, why should we pay them? Let's just have a manifesto, the Emancipation Proclamation, and in one, that's it, you're done. By the way, this was an act of the expropriation of private property. You live in a country that said to all of those people who were slave owners, who had paid good money to buy slaves, we don't care that you paid good money. We don't care that that's all your wealth. As of tomorrow morning, you have nothing. That's what Lenin and Stalin did that time in October, back then in Russia. You have a factory? Ha, you don't. Not tomorrow, you don't. You had it yesterday. Tomorrow, you got nothing. But people who think that this is a Russian specialty, no. That's what we did. That's how we got rid of it. But that's not how all societies do it. In Russia, they bought them out. The British proposal is to buy out the capitalists by lending money at a very low interest rate to the workers so that they can exercise their right of first refusal. This is a way, not as fast as I would like it, but it is a way of building a worker co-op sector pretty soon in historical time, because it's basically saying, you're all on borrowed time, you businesses, because sooner or later you're going to be in one of these situations where you're going to have to give your workers the right to convert it, and we're going to provide the capital to make it happen. Is this doable in the United States? Of course it is. Doable by state, do it by federal. Folks, this is not a technical problem. How to do this, we know all that. From other experiences, from just using our heads. This is only a political problem, the way these things always are. Can we mobilize the people to want this and push for it? Then we get it. Technology, how to do it, these are details we'll figure out, if they haven't already been.
So before, we have like 5 minutes.
Okay.
We're running out of time, so hopefully a short question and a relatively short answer.
All right, I will work at that. Why don't you do this?
You want me-
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah, I actually had a couple of quick things. One is, have you talked to Socialist Alternatives? Because I know part of their platform, having read through, it's really good, is support for worker co-ops. And then the other thing is, there was mention of the film industry, and wouldn't it be cool if we could have the ability to create a film that is a worker co-op based film that was from the bottom up, organized and produced by a co-op.
Yeah, the answer about have we talked to other left groups in the United States, in a casual way, yes. In a systematic way, not at all. And the reason for that is even those who say something about worker co-ops make very few references, and they're very general. And we're kind of beyond that. I mean, we agree with we're glad they say that. We support that and we encourage it. But this is what we focus on. We've done a lot more. So I'm a little embarrassed to have to tell you the story of the British Labour Party because they're so far ahead of anything in this country. We've adopted for Democracy at Work. I speak about this Labour Party thing because they did the work. I can take that and use it and explain it here and explain it in the United States, and people nod and they're excited. Of course, it's better to explain it by saying that a major political party in a country like England is already there, has already adopted this at their convention as their official party policy and what they offer the British people. who are going to have an election on the 8th of June. So it's going to be in the air, all this stuff in England, as part of the life of that society over the next 6 weeks. So it's going to be real, much more real to the British people than it is to the Americans, because it's part of what the official party is. But we don't have anything like that in this country. I mean, so to my knowledge, we're the only one who have run with that ball as far as we have already. We hope that they will be interested and we can collaborate with them, and we're absolutely in favor of that. But there's not much to talk about now. If you look at Bernie, it's the same thing. Bernie has a line in his platform: there should be more cooperatives. Oh, okay, I mean, that's nice, but that doesn't help us very much. I mean, I'm glad it's there, but it doesn't.
You're talking about having a political party to do it. There is a party that's already somewhat interested, and maybe they become a vehicle.
Part of it, absolutely.
Well, the Democratic Socialist Organization, as I've talked to people, they're not involved in the electoral process. They're involved in advocacy and education. The Green Party actually has the infrastructure.
Yes.
Michael Feinstein told me that over 300 candidates have actually been, he himself is one, for mayor of San Jose and Santa Monica, have been elected into office in this country. So they have an infrastructure that has worked at least 300 times. So just FYI.
Yes. No, I think at this point, our hope is to develop the logic, the arguments, the materials, but then to have conversations when we get to the point of a political organization that we try to do, to sit down with all of these other formations to talk about working something out. Absolutely. I mean, I don't mind saying I was asked to help the Green Party on many occasions over the last few years, and I've done that in each case. They're not the only people who reached out to us either, although I'm not clear about what I can or cannot say about the others, but you can all guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we have to call it, guys. I'm really sorry, but yeah, it's coming to the end. So let's thank Richard Wolff.